Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Hite Namani.
Obviously, the first time someone meets Prabhupada, it's the seminal event, the watershed event of their life. You know, we hear, well, where were you when Kennedy was shot, or this or that. People have these historical that they associate with. And so, obviously, for every devotee that ever got an opportunity to meet Prabhupada, that's the seminal event in their lives. That's the highlight of their entire existence, is when you actually meet Prabhupada for the first time. And when Prabhupada came to Gainesville, it was actually a very, very meaningful visit, in the sense that Prabhupada wasn't there for any managerial purposes. Gainesville was not a big, important temple. If I had said to anybody at the time, I'm from Gainesville, Florida, they would look at me like I'm crazy. Where are you from? Where's that? Nobody had ever heard of Gainesville. It wasn't even on the ISKCON map, so to speak. And so for Prabhupada to come to this place in the middle of nowhere was actually a very amazing event, so to speak. And when Prabhupada actually came, he was engaged in preaching the whole time he was there. We had set up engagements. So he was preaching the whole time he was there. But it was very interesting, because when he came and he gave his introductory lecture when he first arrived at the temple room, he said quite appropriately, I'm very happy to be here in this very remote place, thousands and thousands of miles from the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Mayapur. Now, obviously, every place in America is somewhat remote from Mayapur. But in LA, for example, you can get on a plane, you can be in Calcutta in 22, 23 hours, and in 3 hours more on a car, you're in Mayapur. But to even get, I can't remember whether Prabhupada came from New York or Detroit or Chicago, it was one of those places, because there were a lot of devotees that got initiated right before me in those places. So Prabhupada was coming in from New York or some northern city, and he had to go to Atlanta and change planes in Atlanta. And then he had to go to Jacksonville from Atlanta and then drive 2 hours to get to Gainesville. So by the time he gets to Gainesville, he says, I'm very happy to be in this very remote place. And I'm so happy to see all these boys and girls that are chanting and dancing in the middle of nowhere. And there was a reporter there, and she was actually quite friendly with the devotees. I was good friends with her. And she asked Prabhupada one significant question that stands out in my mind. Why are there only young people in your movement? Why aren't there any old people? And Prabhupada gave a very good analogy. And he said, at this university, what do you see there? You see only young people. You don't see any old people. Why is that? See, because when you're young, he said, that is the time. That is the time for your spirituality. That's when is the best period of your life for taking to this process. And he said, it is too late for the old fools. And everybody laughed, of course. Nobody was offended by that. But it got the point across quite effectively. So Prabhupada came and he lectured, and all the local reporters were there. So that was, Prabhupada was enlivened by that. And then from there, he bathed and took a shower or whatever, took a bath and changed. And then he came out to the university, to the plaza. That's where he spoke, on the Plaza of the Americas, which is the same place we used to have those anti-war demonstrations, and the same place where Gargamuni came, somewhat like Tompkins Square Park, so to speak, sitting down in a park, same formula. So Prabhupada was on a stage, and he spoke on the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, on Sankhya Yoga. And it was a very sophisticated lecture. It was a very high-level philosophical presentation. And I was thinking, well, how are they going to understand this? I can barely understand this. This is so intellectual and philosophical. I don't even understand this. How are the students going to understand? There were about 700 or 800 students there. And But afterwards, all the students came up and said, "Oh, that was the best lecture I ever heard in my life. That was great. That was wonderful. I enjoyed it so much." And it just, Prabhupada knew exactly where he was and who his audience was. At all times, he was cognizant of the message that he wanted to present to the audience. And for this group of students, he chose the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And it made a big impression on them. And many people came, even years and years afterwards, who were there still remember. It was for them also a watershed moment in their lives. They'll never forget that. They'll take that with them whether they become a devotee or not for the rest of their lives. It made a big impression on them.
I was already a devotee for about a year, and I had just got initiated by letter, and first initiation. And we were in Gainesville. Ananga was the president, and I was like everything else. Small preaching center. And we invited Prabhupada. Amarendra was a driving force for that. That picture in Bhagavad Gita, the picture that they put, the main picture in Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada's sitting, and there's a picture of Gopal Krishna behind him with some not symmetrical flowers and leaves. That we did that. That was in Gainesville. And the garland that wasn't symmetrical. We got lots of flowers for him. So anyway, we were all excited because this was the first time I was going to see Prabhupada. And I stayed back. They went to the airport to pick him up. I stayed back and I was fixing his room with many magnolias to make a nice scent and things like that. And then I knew that Prabhupada had come because the kirtan outside had stopped and everyone was paying obeisances. So I ran down the steps and I was just running out the screen door and Prabhupada was already standing there. And I just backed off and paid my obeisances. And I was thinking, I want to see him, so I'm going to offer them fast. So he was already, when I got up, even though I got up fast, he was already looking very relaxed, like it's like he's floated into the temple room. He already had his cane leaned against the Vyasana and he's looking at, we only had a picture of Panchatattva that Gayatri had painted. And he just looked so relaxed, like he was there forever. It was quite amazing. And I actually saw light emanating from his body. And I saw this like incredible aura of incense all around. And I thought, am I seeing things? I didn't like that much incense. And I thought, I want to keep this vision in my mind always. Because whatever it is, whether it's real, materially real, or spiritually real, it's quite a vision, and I always remember that. Years later, someone was speaking of Prabhupada, Bhagawat was speaking of Prabhupada in a temple here in Alachua. Many years later. And he actually said that he was there, and that was, I think, his first time seeing Prabhupada. And he said the same thing. He saw the same thing, this aura of light and incense all around. And when he said that, I was like, oh, then it really happened. So it was a mystical experience that Prabhupada was allowing some of us to see.
When the community, the whole city found out that Prabhupada was coming, they were actually very excited. And the local newspaper the next day ran a story on the front page with a picture of Prabhupada on the plaza. Hare Krishna leader comes to Gainesville. And there was one professor at the university who ran the TV station. There was a campus TV station. It was actually the PBS station, the public broadcasting station. And as soon as he heard that Prabhupada was coming, he started calling me every day. He wanted desperately to do an interview with Prabhupada. He was so determined that Prabhupada would appear. He had an evening show, he had an interview show, and would have prominent guests on his program. And so he was bugging me every day, please bring Bhaktivedanta. Please, can we have an interview with Bhaktivedanta? I would be so happy, I would be so grateful. So finally, Prabhupada agreed to do it. So he was quite ecstatic. So that evening, after we got back from the plaza, Prabhupada rested a little bit and had some visitors, darshan with some Indians and other guests. And that evening, about 8:30, we went to the TV station for an interview. And that's been published. That's called Transcendental Broadcast. And the BBT published a little booklet of that interview. And the thing I remember most about the interview was the professor, Mark Damon was his name actually, kept trying to get Prabhupada to say something provocative or controversial. They said, why have you come to him? And he knew the philosophy quite well. He had read some books to brush up before the interview, and he knew about Lord Chaitanya, he knew the history, he knew about Prabhupada being instructed by Bhaktisiddhanta to come to the West. And he said, but he still wanted to make the program ratings friendly, so to speak, by getting Prabhupada, Hare Krishna leader says, Christian religion is no good and everyone should become Hare Krishnas. So he kept trying to get Prabhupada to say something like that, and Prabhupada would not take the bait. And he said, no, we're not here to, we are simply saying, chant the name of God. You've got your name of God, you can chant that, that's okay. We don't say you must chant our name of God, but just chant the name of God. That is our process. And so Prabhupada kept giving him these answers, these non-sectarian answers. And so this interviewer, our professor, he was getting cut to pieces, but Prabhupada was doing it so smoothly that he didn't even know it. He couldn't even understand it. It's like getting cut with a razor blade. It's so sharp, you never even realize it till all the blood is pouring out. So Prabhupada was defeating him at every turn and not taking his bait. And every time Prabhupada would kind of score a point, if you're in a debate and you're keeping score, Prabhupada, we were all behind the cameras. And Prabhupada was beautiful because, and I'm not saying that, a lot of people say, he was glowing, this, that, He had the TV lights on him, and so that you could see the eyes, the lights in his eyes, and his golden skin was highlighted, and his saffron clothing was highlighted also. But every time that Prabhupada would score this point, for example, Christ said, thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing? Why are you killing? He never said, thou shalt not kill only human beings. He said, everybody, thou shalt not kill. He was making these points, and then he'd kind of glance over at the devotees. We were behind the cameras, and he'd have this little twinkle in his eye and this little smile on his face because he knew he was defeating this guy. Not that that was so important to Prabhupada, but he knew, and the devotees were really relishing this discussion or debate, and Prabhupada just kind of glance over, and we see this little twinkle in his eye, and then the professor invited all the devotees to come in front of the cameras and chant. So it was a very auspicious program.
Towards the end of his lecture, he said, I have one devotee named Kartikeya, and his mother was on her deathbed because he was expressing the point that anyone who remembers Krishna at the time of death will go to Krishna. So he said she was on her deathbed and she challenged, where is Krishna? Is he here now? Where is your Krishna? Is he here now? And then she died. And Prabhupada said, so she went to Krishna. And he leaned forward and he said, this is stated in Bhagavad Gita, with his eyes big. And he was like, this is stated in Bhagavad Gita. She went to Krishna. And I just remembered these little tidbits because they were very important for me. The mercy that he gave, the grace, his grace.
I asked Prabhupada, how can we make people Krishna conscious? We're always trying to think of some profound question to ask Prabhupada or something. So I said, Prabhupada, how can we make people Krishna conscious? And I was expecting some elaborate answer, formula. You do this, you do this, you do this. And Prabhupada said, simply request that they chant Hare Krishna, and then your business is finished. And he repeated it. And devotees sometimes say, well, I was in the audience and Prabhupada said something. It was almost as if he was talking to me. Well, Prabhupada was talking to me, but I wasn't listening. You see, I wasn't listening because I have many defects and many frailties, but the worst of them is attachment to the fruits. Very fruitive. I'm very passionate and very attached to the fruits of my labor, even though it's dovetailed in Krishna consciousness. When I was in Gainesville preaching to students, I was desperately wanted them to become devotees, almost willing them with my mind, you must become a devotee. I wanted to take away their free will and make them a devotee. And later on, when I was a lawyer, winning and losing cases, I was so attached to winning for Krishna, but still winning nonetheless, because I was not listening to Prabhupada that night. I didn't hear what he said, because when he said, then your business is finished, that's right out of the Bhagavad Gita, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you have no right to the fruits of your endeavors. That is up to Krishna, and that belongs to Krishna. And I just didn't hear Prabhupada what he was saying. He was talking to me because he knew this guy's attached. He has these attachments. But I didn't hear.
Then Bhagwat asked, Prabhupada, how can we not fall into Maya? And Prabhupada said, it is like a boat. He said, you stay on the boat, and Maya may rock the boat, but you don't jump off the boat, you hold on to the boat, you stay on it. So basically stay in the association of devotees and keep trying, no matter how, you may get wet, but you still stay on the boat. So that was a nice thing.
I do remember him making a comparison of the material world to a lion, and how people voluntarily choose to stay in the material world and subject ourselves to all of this suffering, and birth, death, disease, and old age, and adhyatmika, adhibodhika, adhidaivik, and so forth. And he said, well, and Prabhupada said, why would you do that? Why would people choose this? It's like a lion. You don't go up to a lion and say, oh, Mr. Lion, please open your mouth. I wish to enter. It's like we're asking Maya, open your jaws and let us enter into this miserable condition of life. And that's all I remember that Prabhupada said that night.
And then he noticed that we didn't have neck beads on. So he said to Hridayananda, who was the president, why there are no neck beads? And I don't know, he said we didn't have neck beads. In those days, they only came from India, and it was very scarce, I guess. So the next day, Hridayananda told me, we have to have neck beads. So I ran to a corner store. Gainesville was not a big city then. And I ran to this little bead shop that's still around in Gainesville. And all I could find was neon-colored plastic beads. There was no wooden beads at all. And so I bought these different colors of neon plastic beads. Bright yellow and lime green and, bright orange. And we strung those, and we all wore them the next day. And Prabhupada just looked at, he never said anything, but I'm sure. It was a funny dog collar, that we got for him. I was supposed to have Brahmin initiation at that time. So I walked in Prabhupada's room, and there was no one in there, only Prabhupada. He was sitting very grave. And when I walked in, he said, sit down. And I felt like a little dog, so I just sat down. I remember thinking I'm like a puppy. I'm his puppy dog with my dog collar, my new dog collar, so my neon. So I sat down at his feet, and he said, repeat after me. And he did this, and he also said, Om, Bor, Bhuva, Swa. And I was like, okay, Om, I got. The rest of it, I did not get. So he just stopped, and he said, repeat. I said, repeat. And he said, Om, Bor, Bhuva. And I'm like, Om. And that was about it. And then he said, they did not give you a paper? And I said, no, Prabhupada, no one gave me a paper. So then he said, never mind. He said, Hridayananda will give the mantra to you tomorrow. And then he went like this, and I just said, okay, the dog is being kicked out. So I stood up, and I was walking backwards because I didn't want to put my back to Prabhupada. So I'm walking, and I'm going, thank you, Prabhupada, thank you. And I'm walking back, and he just looked around and picked a big garland off of his desk and looked at me with a big smile, and he went like this and threw it at me. Like he just gave me that smile nod and threw it at me. And I was like, thank you, Prabhupada, thank you. And that was my Brahmin initiation. So I'm not really officially a Brahmin. later on when we did have the fire jugular, when Prabhupada wasn't there, we didn't have enough bananas to go around, so I gave my banana to someone else. So I didn't even have a banana for the fire. But that's why I really realized that I'm a Kripa Siddhi. I'm not a Sadhana Siddhi, I'm a Kripa Siddhi, and Prabhupada, I guess, knew this, so he didn't take these things seriously for me. And that's where my relationship with him is just the mercy and the grace.
Then the next morning, he was only there for a short period of time, and we took him back to Jacksonville the next morning. I wasn't there when he arrived because I was back at the temple. I was the temple commander at the time, and so I was busy fixing up the temple, finishing the Vyasasana and so forth. But that next day, when we took Prabhupada back to Jacksonville to catch his flight, we were in the airport waiting. And of course, in those days, you could go past security. We didn't have all this 9/11 security checks like we do now. So we were all in the waiting area, and Prabhupada was sitting in a chair waiting for his flight, the plane to leave, to board. And there was a kirtan in the airport, and all people started to gather around the perimeter of the waiting area. A big crowd, a sizable crowd had formed of people just wanting to know what's going on here. This is Jacksonville, Florida. And a place where every time we would do Harinam, we would get arrested because of all the Christian persecution there, so to speak, and we were just heathen to them, these Eastern idol worshippers and so forth. But a crowd had formed, and I was sitting right at Prabhupada's feet, and I thought, oh, I'm really right, I must be special, because I'm sitting right here at Prabhupada's lotus feet. Wow, what mercy. But Hridayananda and Ananga Manjari, who was his wife at the time, when they saw the crowd, they got some books, and they went out and they started distributing books to the people in the crowd. And Prabhupada saw them do this. And when Prabhupada saw them, the entire time that he stayed in that terminal, he did not take his eyes off them. He watched them the entire time while they were passing out books. And I understood at that point, oh, if I want to please Prabhupada, I can see he's not paying any attention to us. We're chanting, we're here, but he's watching Hridayananda and Ananga Manjari distribute books. So it told me quite a bit about how to get Prabhupada's attention, distribute his books.
I was in LA, actually. Hridayananda and I had gone so that we could ask Prabhupada about taking sannyas. And while we were there, we got to go in his room quite often. So we got to go around with him, and the devotees were showing him the different offices there. So one office was the telex office, like the temple office. And they showed him the new telex machine. And they were saying, Prabhupada, this can give a message in seconds, and you can receive messages back. So he wanted to see how it worked. So they sent a message to New York Temple, and Brahmananda was there. And they sent a message, and he wasn't responding. They said, Prabhupada is sitting right next to the telex machine. Please respond. So then right away, oh, please accept our obeisances. And Prabhupada was very impressed. And he was, yes, utilize these things. Utility. Prabhupada was big on utility. Like everything in this material world is actually Krishna already and Krishna's, so use it for him. And I think that's one of his legacies. And then we went into another office where they were recording music. Devotees were recording music, and they had one recording of devotees singing with guitars and regular drums and Western music, and they were singing Namaste Narasingaya, and it was real rocking. And Prabhupada was standing there and listening to the whole thing, and he was knocking his cane to the beat with a big smile. And at the end, he said, "This is better than George Harrison." So I want to be able to say that I know many devotees dismiss this kind of music, but that's what Prabhupada said. And another incident there in LA, we were in his room, and the devotees came in with a CD a tape of the roadshow. And they played it for Prabhupada. We were all sitting in his living room in LA. And it felt like a grandfather. I felt like we were with, like as if very familiar with our grandfather in family gathering, and we're listening to something amazing. And anyway, they were playing, You're Not That Body with guitars and that. And And Prabhupada was listening, and you couldn't really understand the words, rock music. So he said, "What are they saying?" And they said, "Oh, Prabhupada, they're saying you're not that body." So then Prabhupada said, "Okay." And then he listened a little more, and he said, "Is that Vishnu Jana singing?" He said, "Yes, Prabhupada, that's Vishnu Jana singing." And then he said, "Anyone who hears his voice will become a devotee." So I felt like because of the sincerity, I think it's the intention of how we do things. If we do whatever, rock music, rap music, with the intention to give Krishna, then it will help make devotees. And that's what Prabhupada and Krishna, Lord Chaitanya's movement wants. It's innovative in that way. So I know that Mangalananda had said something like, when he asked Prabhupada that some devotees don't like this, Prabhupada said, "Let the cows moo." And so I always thought that's very important understanding how we can utilize, again, utility, even the other kinds of sounds for Krishna.
He had a darshan with a reporter for the New York Times. The New York Times had always taken somewhat of a keen interest in New Vrindavan for some reason. I don't know what the reason was. So there was a reporter for the New York Times there. And when I got to the darshan, he was speaking with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said to him, he said, "Yes, I have seen your paper. It is so thick. But what do they do with it when they're finished? They throw it in the garbage." And at that time, the Macmillan Gitas had just come out. The big Macmillan Gitas had just come out. So Prabhupada had one on the coffee table in front of him. And he said, put his hand on the Gita, and he said, "But this Bhagavad Gita, this they will keep forever." So this was, he put it, he said this with such love. When he was so happy every time one of his books came out. And this book made Prabhupada very happy. So you could tell how important it was to Prabhupada every time a new book was published.
Again in LA, we were in his room, and there was a reporter, and she asked Srila Prabhupada about, you say that sometimes women are less intelligent. So what do you mean by that? And then Prabhupada said, we can say sometimes women are less intelligent, he said, but when they come to Krishna consciousness, they become most intelligent. He said, when people come to Krishna consciousness, they become the most intelligent. And then there was another lady there from England, and she was introduced to Prabhupada by one brahmachari. He said, "Prabhupada, she wrote to you once in England, and you wrote back to her, now she's here to see you." And Prabhupada said, "Oh, very nice. What can I do for you?" And she stood up. She was she was all decked out with like lots of makeup, and her hair was in a beehive of like all blonde beehive, and she was tight dress, and she stood up and she said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, I just want to get initiated by you." And we were all like, whoa. It was kind of amazing. And Prabhupada said, "Do you know the regulative principles?" And she said, "I never drank or smoked in my whole life." Oh, she said it in English accent, so I couldn't do that. And Prabhupada said, "All right, you will get initiated." And then he told Shruti Kirti, arrange for another set of beads. Just like that. Just like that, his mercy was there. He could see through her simplicity, but sincerity. And the next day, when the initiations were going on, her name was called, and then he gave her the name Meru Devi Dasi. She had the big white, blonde, like Meru Mountain on her head. So we were all laughing. It was quite amazing. Prabhupada had a good sense of humor, even in grave times, even in a time of seriousness of initiation.
Then later on in the darshan, this darshan went on for hours and hours. Later on, a devotee asked Prabhupada, "What does it mean to love the spiritual master? What does that mean?" And again, I kind of equated that to the love that I saw in some of those first devotees who had met Prabhupada on 2nd Avenue, Brahmananda, Gargamuni, Rupanuga. They actually considered Prabhupada their father. They had love for Prabhupada the way we would love our biological parents. That's how they loved Prabhupada. in my opinion, based on what I saw, and I knew them very well. I know them very well. I spent a lot of time with Satsarupa and Rupanuga, Gargamuni, Brahmananda, so forth, and spent a lot of time with them, and I really was impressed how much affection, how much emotional attachment they had to Prabhupada. I didn't have that. I didn't have that. That's, like I said, they loved Prabhupada the way you would love your biological parents. And I didn't have that kind of love. And I don't have that kind of love for Prabhupada. I wish I did. Someday maybe I will, but I don't. So I was expecting that kind of an answer. But Prabhupada said, you have made vow to spiritual master, you take initiation, and you have taken fire sacrifice. Now you keep your vow. That is love. You keep your vow. You made a promise. Don't break your promise. Keep your promise, and that is love. So that blew everybody in the room away. Everybody was like stunned to hear that. Oh my God. Oh, what did I get myself into here? Oh boy, I'm finished.
Hridayananda and I got to be in Prabhupada's room alone, and Prabhupada was sitting there. Maybe Shruti Kirti was in the background. And this was the time when we were going to ask him if we could take sannyas. Because that's how we felt. We felt about it like we were going to take sannyas. You know, it was an adventure that we would sacrifice for Prabhupada. We were married 1 year, and in those days it wasn't really like we were married, because we were mostly living in the Brahmacharya Brahmatrini ashram, managing the Gainesville temple, and we were friends in preaching, and good commitment, good partnership for preaching, and good friends. And so we thought this would be a great sacrifice for Prabhupada. So we sat there, and Prabhupada knew we were going to come for this reason. He was aware. We had written to him. So he sat there very gravely, and he said, so, what do you want? And Hridayananda very philosophically said, Srila Prabhupada, it's explained in the Vedas that one studies under the Guru in brahmachari life, and then he gets married and experiences grihastha life, and then he takes sannyas. So I'm asking if I can take sannyas. And Srila Prabhupada said, he waited, he hesitated, and then he looked very grave, and then he said, sometimes it is difficult, like that. And I remember thinking, I was sitting there and I was thinking, difficult, but Prabhupada will carry us through, Krishna will carry what we lack. We want to do this for Prabhupada, And then he said, does your wife agree? And I'm like, and Hridayananda said, yes, Prabhupada, she agrees. And Prabhupada didn't say anything. Then there was some distraction with some other devotee came in or something, and Hridayananda turned to me and said, very eager, we were so young and eager. I was 18, and we were young and eager, and he said, does that mean yes? Did Prabhupada mean? And I said, I'm not sure. I said, I think you have to clarify, ask him again. So then when the devotee left and Prabhupada was sitting there, then Hridayananda blurted out very eagerly, so Prabhupada, is it okay then? Can I just take sannyas? It's like, can I just, go lead a kirtan? It was kind of very, too eager. And Prabhupada said, does your wife agree? And again, I'm like, yes. And he's, yes, Prabhupada, she agrees. And he didn't say anything. And then another distraction came, and we all went into the other room. And then when we came back, no, we were still in the other room, and Prabhupada looked at him very closely and said, does your wife agree? And I was standing right there next to him. And again, the third time, yes, Prabhupada. And he said, yes, Prabhupada, she agrees. And then he slapped him on the back with a big smile and says, you have a very good wife because she agrees. And then he came up to me with the most compassionate, melting look in his eyes. And he just came very close to me, and I wasn't expecting this. He came very close and he looked at me, oh my gosh, so lovingly, very deeply lovingly, and he said, what do you want to do? And I was thinking, this is the Jagat Guru. This is the spiritual master of the whole universe. He's asking me what I want. And at this moment, I can have anything I want. Because Krishna, whatever he says, Krishna will back him up. All these thoughts went in my head. And I thought, this is the moment of my life when whatever I say will be the most important thing. And this is Jagat Guru. Krishna will back him up. I'll get anything I want in the whole universe. So I kind of hesitated because I was thinking all these things. And I even like stepped back a little because I was like, oh, it's overwhelming. And I stepped back and I was thinking, like hesitating to answer. And I remember it was like a film of millions of desires going through my head. You know, on television when they show the end of someone's life and everything in their life goes through their heads. And it was like, just like I experienced that. Every desire that I could possibly have had, even from lifetimes, even things that weren't familiar, was going through my head like a reel. And all of a sudden I just said, oh, Srila Prabhupada. I was trying to buy time because all this experience was going on. I said, I just want to be Krishna conscious. And it came out, and it came out so vivid that I almost saw the words coming out of my mouth. Like, where did that come? I was astounded at the same time that those were the words that came out, because it wasn't what I had been thinking. It wasn't like a clear desire, yes, I want to be Krishna. So the words came out like that, and Prabhupada stepped back and looked at me, and looked like, I remember, just like as if an artist had created something, and then he was stepping back to see how his creation was. Did it work out? You know, kind of like that thing. And the way he looked at me was just like that, and I thought, he made those words come out. He pulled them out of me, out of his love. Out of that compassionate look, he pulled those words out of my heart from somewhere. And then he went like this and said, you are already Krishna conscious. And when he went like this, it was like, whoom, like, and I remember thinking, this is what he's doing for all of us. Immediately I thought, he's doing this for all of us. He pulls this desire out of us for love of Krishna and determination to try to be Krishna conscious. And then he just whams us with grace and love and mercy. And so this was a very significant part of my life. It kept me going for many, many years. It's for all of us. It's for everyone. His disciples, grand disciples, it's for everyone. We are already Krishna conscious because of just trying to do something for him.
Wow. In 1972, in furtherance of my political aspirations, as I mentioned, I was a political radical before I became a devotee. And I kind of put all that aside when I became a devotee. But then Prabhupada was traveling, and when he would travel, Shyamasundar was his secretary, and wherever Prabhupada would go, Shyamasundar would send letters to all the temples telling everybody, well, Prabhupada was here and he saw this head of state, or he had this engagement in what Prabhupada was preaching, and give us a kind of like a detailed account of Prabhupada's activities, like a diary or a journal. And so one day he wrote something about Prabhupada saying, well, we should enter politics, meaning the devotees should become involved in political activities. And it was in Africa. I don't remember the context, but it was in Africa. When I saw that just immediately, oh, politics, I can do that? I was like astonished. I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. So immediately I made arrangements, or I started working on a political preaching program. And by that I mean, because of the different election laws, all you had to do is get a certain number of signatures on a petition and turn it into the registrar, and you could get on the ballot for some elected position. And then, once you were on the ballot, if they had to invite you to every engagement and give you equal time under the fairness doctrine. Federal Communications Act has a fairness doctrine that all the candidates have to have equal time. So I wrote Prabhupada and told him about this. And Prabhupada, I got 2 letters in 1972. and where Prabhupada gave me his approval to do that. And he said, yeah, I like this very much. And those letters they're available in the archives or whatever. And they were really, amazing letters. They weren't just for me, but Prabhupada was saying, he said, yeah, this is a very good opportunity to preach widely and distribute our books. So take advantage. So Prabhupada saw that as an opportunity, not so much that we were going to get elected, but that we could use that as an opportunity to preach and to distribute books. But he did say a few things in the first letter I got that kind of relate back to that anti-war demonstration. He said our platform is very simple, that regularly the people should come together and have kirtan. And then afterwards, there should be wide-scale distribution of Krishna Prasadam. So that is our platform. He said, who will not be attracted? And he said, yes, I want that you should endeavor for these political posts. You should expose these Nixons and replace them. That's a quote from a letter. And this is before Watergate. He said, you should expose these Nixons and replace them. And he said, politician means pickpocket, tell the people whatever they want to hear to get elected and then pick their pocket because in 2 or 4 years they know they could be out of office, so they grab all the money they can in the meantime. And that's kind of like relevant to what's going on right now contemporaneously with all this fiscal cliff stuff in American politics with the budget and the debt, the national debt and so forth. But it's all because the politicians have ruined everything. Prabhupada said the people are innocent. These are all in the letters that he sent. He said people are innocent, but these rascal leaders have misled them. So I am very much encouraged that you boys and girls should expose these Nixons and replace them. And he gave us a lot of tremendous encouragement that also we have a grave responsibility, seeing the condition of the world. Prabhupada was exhibiting his Vaishnav, that Vaishnav sentiment of Prahlad Maharaj and Advaita Acharya to the suffering of the conditioned souls makes the pure devotee suffer. He suffers seeing them suffer because it's all based on identification with this body. And the political leaders keep people in bodily concept of life with the assistance of the material scientists to give them all of this facility for sense enjoyment. And in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada, he spares no quarter. He attacks the politicians viciously over and over again, especially in the first canto with the story of Parikshit Maharaj, fourth canto with Prithu Maharaj. He really goes after the politicians. So Prabhupada liked this idea of getting in the middle of that phenomena, getting in the middle of that whole process and interrupting it, sabotaging it, so to speak, and changing the agenda. In all of our political programs, by the end of that, whatever it was, a radio program, TV program, a debate, all the other candidates for whatever the office was would be saying, oh yeah, I believe in God, I go to church, I do this, I do that. They were all trying to justify their spiritual qualifications for so we were actually able or successful in changing the discussion from all of these ridiculously stupid and mundane issues to something that was really important. Because Prabhupada says over and over again, the only solution is God-conscious leadership.
I liked to call this story Flower Power because anything that the saintly person touches becomes mercy, prasadam, amazing. With transcendental, his energy goes into it. So that's anything that he touches, a person with a word or with something tangible. And we were in LA, and somehow or other I got right behind Prabhupada when he was paying his obeisances to the deities. I was right behind him, and so his lotus feet, when I went to pay my obeisance, his lotus feet were right in front of my face. And I thought, what an opportunity. This is the opportunity of many lifetimes. What can I do? And I thought, I don't want to disturb him. I don't want to touch him and then disturb him at all, because he's in meditation on praying to his Lord. But there was a carnation petal stuck on his foot, and the little stem of the carnation petal was very invitingly sticking out. So I thought, maybe I can do this and get this mercy without disturbing him. So very carefully, this is while everyone's paying obeisances, very carefully I plucked that little carnation petal off his foot. And then I got very frightened, because I thought, oh, someone's going to have seen me and they're going to think I'm disturbing him. They're not going to understand. And I could just picture some sannyasi booming, what did you just do? Aparad, offense, And I just got so scared, I just popped it in my mouth. I ate the evidence, no one said anything, no one saw, but I was so afraid that someone would. So I just popped it in my mouth. It's like eating the evidence. And then I thought, this is the holiest communion that I've ever had in my life. This is going to keep me here forever. And it did. That flower petal has kept me here. So that's the flower power.
In 1972, earlier that year, before the New Vrindavan Festival, I went down to Miami Beach for the 1972 Republican Convention. And with Mahavir, who was a good friend of mine, we put together a prasadam program for all the demonstrators that were camping out on Miami Beach at a place called Flamingo Park. So every day we'd bring prasadam out there and to feed all the protesters and so forth who were there to disrupt the Republican Convention. And Nixon, of course, was being nominated at that convention. And so we became very popular. And one night we were having a street sankirtan in front of the convention center, and it was getting dark. It was kind of like, you can edit this out later on. It's just kind of a prelude to that other darshan I had with Prabhupada. But it was getting dark, and we were going through the crowd single file, and we really couldn't see where we were. We knew we were on a sidewalk outside of the Miami Beach Convention Center, and we were going single file. There were about 8 or 9 of us. Sridham was leading the kirtan. And then all of a sudden, all these TV lights just go on. Out of the darkness, these lights and we looked around, and on one side, we see thousands of these angry anti-war demonstrators, and they were mad, and they were getting ready to storm the convention center. They were going to storm it and crash the convention and disrupt it. Of course, on the other side, there were hundreds and hundreds of police in their riot gear, and National Guardsmen and state police, and they were in their gas masks and shotguns, and we were right smack dab in the middle between these two camps, so to speak. And when we saw that, we looked around and we saw where we were. The whole Sankirtan party spontaneously went about 3 or 4 feet up in the air. And we just started chanting for our lives, because we thought we were going to get caught right in the middle of this confrontation. So we started chanting like crazy. And as we were chanting, the crowd started to mellow out a little bit. Allen Ginsberg was there. He came up, he started chanting with us. And then the anti-war leaders, the leaders of the anti-war demonstration, they came up to us, and they were so furious. They were outraged. They said, "You're ruining it for us. You're ruining this demonstration. You got to get out of here. You got to stop this chanting right now," because, sound vibration. They were chanting their chants about 1, 2, 3, stop. We don't want your blanking war, bleeping war, this and that, all those things that they used to. And they had the crowd worked up through sound vibration, through the ether that was traveling on the ether. But when we started chanting, we kind of like neutralized the impact of their sound vibration by the Maha Mantra, and people started mellowing out. And in a few minutes, some people started dancing, and a few minutes later, more and more people started dancing and mellowing out. And then a detective from the Miami Beach Police Department came up to us and said, could you just lead these people back to the park? So we went back to we headed back to the park, and the whole crowd just followed us back to the park. And later on that same police detective came up to us and bought a book and gave a donation and said, "You guys stopped a riot. There was a riot that was a bunch about to happen, and you guys stopped it." And I told Prabhupada that story at this other darshan. I don't think anybody else was actually even there. Somehow I was just in the room with Prabhupada, and I told Prabhupada that story, and Prabhupada said, "Oh, just see the power of the holy name."
Now, in New York Airport, Prabhupada was coming in, and just like many, many devotees have described, Prabhupada would float through the airport, and we would all be running to keep up, and he would just be floating through, and it was just like that. Like as if he was on one of those escalator things, and we're all running, huffing and puffing to keep up with him. And they sat him down and gave a little talk. He gave a little talk in the airport. And there were some policemen watching our crowd, and they were in the distance. And there's a picture of this somewhere where the policemen were there. And Prabhupada, the reporter asked Prabhupada something, "Why do you wear these clothes and this mark on your forehead?" And Prabhupada said, "It is just like a policeman." And he said, a policeman wears a uniform to show that he's, an authority of the government. He represents the government. So anyone who needs help in that way can go to the policeman. So the policemen were in the background, and they were nudging each other and feeling very proud and happy that Prabhupada had noticed them. And I thought that was like he was doing few things at once, instructing us and pleasing their hearts, winning their hearts. So he was not just satisfying the reporter. Of course, he was preaching to all of us and each of us as an individual, but he noticed the policemen specifically, and I think that's significant that he wanted to say thank you for their service. He was grateful. Prabhupada was a grateful person. He was grateful for anyone who did the least little thing, and that is something I think we all can imbibe, that gratitude that Prabhupada gave us, to be able to see everyone and anyone, and even small people. And sometimes devotees, we think some devotee is just doing their service quietly, and we think they're just some little devotee, my service is more important. But we should always try to show that gratitude and appreciation. That's how everyone can feel uplifted. It's very important that we make a conscious effort. That was his quality of kindness to all living beings. It's the quality of a devotee, one of the main qualities that he had. Even for people, even if they seem insignificant or they're just doing their duty, they're just doing what they had to do, but he gave them a taste of spirituality, spiritual life, through his kindness. So I thought that was very nice. And then someone asked Prabhupada something about why you're chanting, and Prabhupada said, we are chanting, but we also have many books. He always wanted people to understand that there's knowledge behind this, philosophy behind it. He said, but for those who cannot read books, just chant. It doesn't matter. But otherwise, we have many books with philosophy. I thought that was very significant and that very important for me, because I was into the philosophy. That's what kept me. The mantra caught me. I could not stop chanting Hare Krishna. Even as a hippie, I was chanting, but the philosophy kept me.
Prabhupada was staying on the third floor of the Pittsburgh temple at the time, and I was up on the third floor one day, and I don't know what I was doing there, but Prabhupada was in the room with a couple of reporters, so I went in and I sat down, and these reporters were interviewing him, and one reporter asked him, "Do you really think you can take over the world? Are you serious?" And Prabhupada never missed a beat. He never was off message, even for an instant. Not even for a heartbeat was he off message. Always determined, always his eyes on the ultimate goal. So Prabhupada, without even skipping a beat, yes, if they will only listen to me. Again, hearing from the spiritual master, hearing from the pure devotee, if they will listen, which is what I was not doing when I got initiated, then we can take over the world.
In Philadelphia in 1975 at Rath Yatra, Srila Prabhupada was there, and in his lectures, it was the lectures about Ajamil. And at one point he was saying how Ajamil may have or may not have been chanting Narayan consciously. He may have been thinking of his child, he may have been actually thinking of Lord Narayan. He was not clear on that. And then he said, it was an accidental fall down. Jamil's fall down was accidental. So later on in his room, there was several of us in his room, and one devotee asked, Prabhupada, what did you mean by accidental fall down? And Prabhupada said, it's when Maya has you at gunpoint. You have no choice. If someone has you at gunpoint, you have no choice. So Maya, the pushings of Maya will have sometimes us at gunpoint. So then we fall down. And Prabhupada did not take that as the person's fault in a way. Krishna will still give you the mercy if you keep, you try. And somehow or other, someone asked about did he really mean his Krishna? They were thinking he must have meant Krishna. The way they asked the question in the room was kind of like he must have meant Narayan. He must have meant his Lord. He must have remembered. Prabhupada said it didn't matter. Doesn't matter. He chanted the name without offense, with innocence. So that was beautiful. Those are the mercy aspects of our philosophy that I think are so basic. If we don't have that with our philosophical understanding, we kind of have a hard edge, and we miss out in our own lives, that bhakti, that love for Krishna, and we miss out in giving it to others when we just have the hard edge of preaching without that mercy element.
In Chicago, 75, I'm not sure, Prabhupada came for the Chicago Rath Yatra. I was in one darshan, and Prabhupada said several things that stood out in my mind. First of all, he said there would be a war with China. I'd never heard that. He had talked about India and Pakistan being the spark that ignites World War III. He had said that many times. And by the way, that's still a distinct possibility. That could still happen at any time. It's not like, in terms of geopolitical reality, India and Pakistan is always a possibility. They both have nuclear weapons. It could happen at any time. But he said, the Chinese, I don't know how we got on that subject, but he said the Chinese, yes, there will be a war with China. And everybody was kind of like shocked. Prabhupada never said that before. And he said, yes, the Chinese, they are the lowest because they will eat anything. Therefore, they are the lowest. I said, Prabhupada, isn't there any way to avoid it? And Prabhupada just shook his head, no. They will eat anything. He said that several times.
I was in Delhi, and Prabhupada had come through Delhi. It was just a short trip he was making through Delhi. And I was in charge of getting him some lychees, which I didn't even know what lychees were. But I ran to the market, and there was one English gentleman saw that I couldn't relate to the fruit vendor, the fruit wallah. So he said, Madam, can I help you? And I said, yes, I'm trying to get lychees for my spiritual master. And he said, oh, let me get them for you. So he bought a big bag of lychees, and I told him, please come and see Guru Maharaj will be there, Srila Prabhupada, and you come to the darshan this evening. So when Prabhupada was giving darshan that evening, he was talking about karma, and he was saying how no matter how much you try to enjoy, you can only enjoy this much, and you suffer that much. No matter what you do, whatever is according to your karma. You enjoy this much, you suffer. And he kept repeating kind of this concept. And right at that time, the Indian gentleman walked in. And as soon as Prabhupada saw him, he saw that this is an intelligent, English-speaking, educated gentleman. Prabhupada immediately called him up and made him sit next to him. I felt so happy that that happened. And then Prabhupada turned to him and said the same thing. No matter how much you try to enjoy, but you become a devotee. You become a devotee of Krishna, and then no more happiness, no more suffering. He said, no more of that material happiness and suffering, no more of this duality is what he meant. But he said, no more suffering, no more happiness. And then he paused, and I was thinking, I feel I'm trying to be a devotee and that I'm suffering. my mind and so many things. I'm suffering sometime. So I raised my hand and I said, Srila Prabhupada, is it to the extent that we're Krishna conscious, then it's Krishna, or not, or karma? And Prabhupada said, it's all Krishna, it's all Krishna. He said, anytime you chant Hare Krishna, you will be happy, and that is coming from Krishna. And he paused, and I thought, yes, I understand that when I'm chanting Hare Krishna, I'm happy, and that's coming from Krishna. But I blurted out, but the distress too, Srila Prabhupada. And then he said, it's just like the chatak bird. He said, the chatak bird only takes water from the clouds. The chatak bird will not drink from the rivers or the ponds. He said, so he's always praying to the clouds, and he went like this with his hand, where is rain, where is rain? And he said, but sometimes he gets thunderbolt. And Prabhupada went just like that to me. He goes, yes, and everyone laughed. We all laughed. So then Prabhupada said, yes, sometimes he gets thunderbolt. And I thought, whoa, it's like, okay. So now I call it, whenever I'm in distress or a devotee is in distress, I call it thunderbolt mercy, because it's coming from Krishna. And then in that, and somehow it's always for our benefit. Then in that same darshan, one young brahmachari said, Prabhupada, I was in Vrindavan and they were doing some Krishna Leela or Ram Leela, and they were, all the guests at the end, all the audience came up to the actors and actually touched their feet and put garlands on them and was giving them money. And I was telling them, this is wrong. They're not Krishna. They're not Radha. This isn't right. And Prabhupada said, no. He said, they are. When they're acting that part, they are. They are Krishna and Radha. They are Ram. They're empowered by Krishna and Radha. They're empowered by Ram. So it's okay, because those people are not worshiping the actor. They're worshiping Krishna. They're just like Krishna can be, oil paint or sand or, out of any material element. So those material bodies are not Krishna, but they are worshiping the spirit of Krishna inside them. So I thought that was very significant for all actors and dramatists to understand that. And I think some of you have probably already felt that when you've acted, that you're empowered and you don't even remember yourself. You lose yourself in the performer, in the character.
And then he said also, he was talking about Guru Maharaj Ji, that little boy that used to dress up like Krishna. They were so offensive because he'd dress up like Krishna and he'd have his gopis, and everybody knew what a fraud it was except his own followers. So somebody had told him, that about this little kid, and he's claiming to be Krishna, he's claiming to be God. And Prabhupada got quite furious, he got quite angry. He said, he is claiming to be God? You kick on his face with boot, and then we will see if he's God. And everybody laughed. And Prabhupada said, no, he says he is God, he says he is Krishna, you kick on his face with boot. Prabhupada was serious. He said it. When he said it, he wasn't joking around. He never smiled. He never, oh, I'm only joking, I don't really mean that. He said, you kick on his face with boot. And then I think I asked them, I said, well, they're chanting Hare Krishna, Prabhupada. Won't they get any benefit? And Prabhupada said, yes, they will get benefit, but it will take them a very, very, very long time because they're so offensive in the process, imitating Krishna's pastimes, claiming to be Krishna and the gopis and so forth.
So I was in Bombay, and I got to do little services for Srila Prabhupada. Like in the afternoon, I would clean up his room while he was resting, in the greeting room where he would greet guests, and I would arrange his pillows, and I would make sure there were sweets for the guests and give him some sugarcane juice and like this, and some different little things, and a garland and sandalwood paste, and that was my service in the afternoon. It was so wonderful. And at that time, one guest came, and it's a famous actor in India called Dara Singh, and he played Bhima in the old Mahabharat video, and a very old one from the old days in India, an Indian film. He played Bhima, and he played Hanuman, and he played Hanuman in the newer series as well. So he was a person who played many spiritual parts, and he was this huge huge guy. I mean, he was colossal. He was Bhima and Hanuman colossal. And he was really tall and big guy. And he was standing, I remember, I saw the scene. It's like he's standing there and Prabhupada is standing there. Prabhupada has a small demeanor, small posture. And this man is bowing down to Prabhupada. You could see this big, huge person, kind of very humble and bowing down. And he was very humble from deep in his heart. He was a very humble person, not like one of these Indian actors who, are proud. He kept going way down to be under Prabhupada. It was wonderful just to see that, just that vision. And that was a vision that I remembered, how even the great will come down to the power of purity, Prabhupada's purity.
We got to see Prabhupada in like the Shringadev mode. He was furious. I mean, it's not like this Guru Maharaj Ji thing where he got angry. He was furious in Bombay when they wouldn't give us the occupancy permit. He was outraged. He was obsessed with it day and night, that he couldn't believe it. And in India, the land of Krishna appeared, the land where Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita, that they would not give a Krishna temple an occupancy permit. He couldn't believe it. And every darshan, every class, he would just pound the politicians and pound the Indian government. He was so angry. I'd never seen Prabhupada like that before, and never saw him in that mood again, but he was definitely in a Shringadev mode. And all of us were running around trying to meet with politicians. Balavant and myself were meeting with politicians and trying to get this thing straightened out, and we'd come back every day and no, we didn't get anything done today. So finally, Prabhupada himself, he met with the leader of the local Shiv Sane party. I think they're still in existence in India. And Prabhupada himself met with the political leaders of the Shiv Sane party, and they were so impressed with Prabhupada that they gave us the permit. But Prabhupada himself finally intervened and was able to pull those strings to get that permit, even though Mr. Nair had so many politicians on his side, but Prabhupada trumped them. In other words, when Mr. Nair sold the property to ISKCON, sold, quote unquote, the ISKCON, it was a scam. As I said, he was going to take the money that we had paid him and he was going to keep it, and then he was going to pull some strings to get the property back, because Juhu was extremely valuable. Not even so much then, but as it is today. Today it's like Beverly Hills real estate. It's like South Beach or something like that. It's prime. So it was a scam, and Mr. Nair was trying to cheat us. He was trying to just do this scam sale, and then later on he's going to pull some political strings and get the property back. But Prabhupada outsmarted him. First of all, he moved the devotees onto the property, set up, and then he installed the deities on the property, thinking they'll never, once the deities are there, no Indian ever in a million lifetimes would ever disturb the deities or challenge the deities. So Prabhupada, he had a strategy. It's like he was from Goloka Vrindavan, but he also knew everything about this political warfare. He was, fully a brilliant tactician as far as that goes. So he moved the devotees onto the property, installed the deities, and his strategy was that in India they will never, ever challenge our ownership of the property once he did that. And he believed he was going to trump Mr. Nair by doing that. He was going to foil Nair's scheme, because he was on to Nair. He was not in any illusion about it. He knew what Nair was up to, but he trumped it. He moved like a chess game. He moved his pieces, tactically, and they were perfect. They were exactly the right moves. That's why he was so astonished when we didn't get the occupancy permit. Because what they were doing, you have installed deities in India, what to speak of Krishna and Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada couldn't believe it. He was astonished. And not only was he astonished, he was furious, like I said. And every darshan we would go to, he would just start railing, and the anger was just pouring out of him. It was just palpable. You could feel it. I mean, everybody was like, we all felt like Lord Nrsingadev was in the room, and we were like the demigods running for cover or something. Not that I'm a demigod or anything like that, but we were running for cover because he was so angry. But in the end, it was Prabhupada himself who intervened when all of us were running around like chickens with our head cut off, trying to do this and do that and get this done and get that done. Prabhupada himself got tired of waiting, and he met with these political leaders of the Shiv Sane party, and afterwards everything worked itself out. Got the permit, and the rest is history.
In Bombay, it was going to be Janmashtami. Prabhupada was there for a couple of weeks, and I was doing these services for him. One devotee asked me if I would be in a drama, in the appearance of Lord Krishna drama. And so I accepted, and we were practicing that during the day on the side. Prabhupada was going to leave Bombay before Janmashtami, and he heard that we were practicing a play. He wanted to see it. So at that time, the construction of the temple was just going on. The big temple wasn't there. It was just a shack for the deities. And yet the construction was there, that there was concrete for the altar was there. And part of the building was over, partial building was there. So there was a big gathering because Prabhupada was leaving. They had called many, many Indians, and there might have been a couple of hundred people coming to see Prabhupada off. And so we got to perform this drama on the altar, on the concrete altar. That was our stage. So I remember driving with Vasudeva, and the voice comes, and Kamsa's going to kill her because, her child is going to kill him. So he's grabbing my hair, and he's like, and I'm like, my prayers were like, oh Krishna, save the child and save, whatever, and and I'm glorifying Krishna. I was just looking at Prabhupada. He was in the audience on a Vyasasana in the middle, and I was just looking at him, and I'm saying the prayers so I could really say them heartfelt. And then, the end of the drama, we're all chanting Hare Krishna on the stage, and I'm looking, where's Prabhupada? I don't see him, and he's not sitting there anymore. Where did he go? And I saw a group of people kind of leaving, so I thought, he's leaving for the airport, and this may be the last time I see him. So I jumped off the stage with my costume. It was like a ornate wedding sari with wedding makeup and all this, and I ran after Prabhupada. And when I got outside, the car already was just going, and I was just standing there seeing the dust from the back of his car, and I was thinking, I got to get to the airport. Somehow or other, I have to get to the airport. So I was a very passionate person. I grabbed my friend Aditya, who is a very sober and humble and shy lady. I grabbed her and I said, we have to go to the airport with Srila Prabhupada. And she goes, how are we going to get there? And there were all these cars and many Indians coming, and there was one car with the doors open. They were waiting for someone to bring them to the airport. I just jumped in the back seat and I pushed her in the back seat. I made her get in with me. So we both got in the back seat of the car and we're saying, this car will definitely go to the airport. Someone will definitely be going, because the doors were open. So it was the sannyasi car. And it was, I believe it was Gopal Krishna Maharaj and a couple of other sannyasis, and they all kind of came with this Indian man, like, who are these women sitting in the car? And I'm like, I was in a state of ecstasy, and I was just, had my eyes closed, and I'm just going, Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. I just have to see Prabhupada. And they just looked at me and they said, let them stay. And some of them got in another car, and 2 or 3 sannyasis piled in the front seat, and they let us stay in the car, and they brought us to the airport. I never said a word, please let us stay. I just was like, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. And so they let us go. So we got to the airport. We got out, myself and Aditya, and we were looking around. There was no devotees, no Prabhupada. We were looking around. We thought maybe he's in the airport. But just as we thought that, one brahmachari came running out and said, Prabhupada's not here yet. And so then he ran back in, and we're looking, well, where is Prabhupada? And all of a sudden, a car pulls up and sees us as devotees standing there and pulls right in front of me. And Prabhupada opens the back seat himself and starts stepping out. And it was at that point it had been drizzling, so I was a little wet, and I'm in this costume with the wedding sari and the wedding makeup and all the jewelry, and I'm a little wet and drenched, and I was crying, so I'm sure my kajal was all smeared on my face. And I was just thinking, when I saw him, he like right in front of me, he stopped the car, he got out, and he stood up with his cane, and he's looking at me, and he had this huge smile on his face from ear to ear, and he's just looking at me with this huge smile, and I'm like, Prabhupada, thank you, thank you. And I paid my obeisances, and I got up, and he's still standing there just waiting and smiling and smiling. And it was the longest moment that I can ever remember. He just stood there smiling, you know, laughing at me in a way, and then he kind of walked on. And I was so excited that I'm looking at him going, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. After I pay my business, I get up, he's still looking. I got so excited, I didn't know what to do. It was like awkward. I started jumping up and down going, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. And then he walked away. But he was smiling from ear to ear. And he walked away into the airport. And then my friend grabbed my arm and said, did you see how he was smiling at you? Did you see he was laughing at you? And she was like in ecstasy. And I'm like, yes, yes. And then I remembered, yes, I remembered. Then I remembered that a long time before, several months before, I was in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada came to the courtyard there to watch a drama of devotees performing. I think it was the age of Kali, and it was Lokamangala and Rasagya. They're very amazing actors. And they were performing the age of Kali. Prabhupada was sitting under the desire tree on a rocking chair, and all the devotees were around on the steps, all around in that courtyard of Vrindavan. And my eyes were mostly on Prabhupada because I just wanted to see how is he reacting to this. And the whole time he was smiling. The whole play he was smiling from ear to ear and sometimes laughing. And then I looked at the actors and I'm looking at Prabhupada and I'm thinking, they're making him smile. They're making him laugh. They're entertaining him. And I had a deep desire in my heart. I looked up and I said, I wish I could entertain Prabhupada like that. I wish I could make him smile. I wish I could, make him laugh at me. And I looked up and I realized, oh my God, I'm just under the edge of the desire tree. So I thought, I wonder if it works. Because that desire was so deep, all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I wonder if this really works. And then, okay, we'll see, So then this is the months later in Bombay, and when she grabbed my arm, and Aditya grabbed my arm and said, did you see how he made you smile, how you made him smile? Did you see how you made him laugh at you? Then I remembered that desire, and I thought, the desire trees, they work, they really work. Because I entertained him, I made him laugh at me. And I always like to say that I hope he's still laughing at me. Because that's my only service that I can do, maybe, is make them laugh at me. I like it when people laugh at me. It's cool. Make them happy somehow or other.
My impression was that in America, he kind of deferred to the Americans. Like in my letters on the political program, Prabhupada said on one occasion, he said, at one time I was also interested in politics, and I was involved in Gandhi's non-cooperation movement. But I am not so interested anymore. So you all Americans, you do what you think is best. Just make Krishna the center. Don't forget about Krishna. So he would kind of defer to the Americans. That's your country. He didn't want to appear to be some Svengali guru from India putting a spell on everybody and all of these disciples and so forth. But he was very deferential to the Americans, and Americans managing according to American customs. But in India, he was very, very involved in every detail of Indian management. So therefore, in America, while he would not get involved in a situation here, in India was a different story. So he would personally get involved in these situations whether it be construction or politics or whatever, but he was expert in every aspect of it. He revealed that not only did he have full spiritual knowledge, but within that spirituality is also the material energy is just part and parcel of the spiritual energy. He was a master tactician and expert in manipulating the material energy on behalf of Krishna, spread Krishna consciousness, spread Lord Chaitanya's movement. He was not daunted by material affairs in the slightest.
My relationship with him seemed like it was always one of compassion, and that he cared for, even though, little people, it didn't matter. Actually, there's another little story about this, that even though I understood and the philosophy was profound for me, it wasn't just sentiment, it was his philosophy kept me safe. So I felt very safe with him philosophically in every way. And at the same time, his demeanor, his actions were very kind and loving, like a grandfather, like a father, grandfather. And in LA, he was sitting on the Vyasa-san. He had just finished leading a kirtan, so he was saying the Jayom prayers. And there were a lot of little children around in LA. And there were several little children in the front of the Vyasa-san when he was saying these Jayom prayers. And, Prabhupada's very grave when he says the Jayom prayers. This is his connection to the disciplic succession, and this is serious, very serious. So he's Jayom, Vishnupad, and he's sounding like that, and we're all bowing down. And I looked up because I wanted to just see him. So I'm looking up at him, and while he's very gravely saying these Jayom prayers, he's making faces at these children at the same time. He's raising his eyebrows and smiling, and he's raising his eyebrows like a monkey, like with big eyes and small and big. And they're all in front of Prabhupada like this, And I just remember that. I thought, how is he doing this? His voice, like when you smile, your voice changes. And when you're grave, your voice is, your mouth and everything is different. And he was doing all these things at the same time. I was watching this, and I was so happy to see how he loved the children. He played with them. He became like childlike at the same time with that deep philosophical connection that's so serious and grave with the disciplic succession. And we talk about, think of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Madhvacharya and the six Goswamis. I mean, it's not silly stuff. And at the same time, he's being silly. And I just saw that in him. And that was something I think, yes, that's... So the safety of his graveness and philosophy and determination and the love and humor and love and compassion that he had for each of us.
On this occasion, we were in Prabhupada's quarters, and there was a bhajan. I don't remember whether it was Bhakti Vinod or Bill Mangal or who it was, but there was a bhajan, and so we were chanting bhajan, and so afterwards Prabhupada was giving a little purport for the meaning of the bhajan, and he said, and this is something that also served me well later on, very well later on. He said, yes, this chanting and dancing in the association of devotees is very powerful. And he said, the association of devotees, even if it becomes intolerable, you must still tolerate. That's how important it is. Tolerate the intolerable. And that always, that's what got me through so many trials and tribulations over the years. Not so much the ordinary things with Adhyatmik, Adhidaivic, and Adhibautic, those kind of trials, but the ISKCON trials and tribulations. Let's be honest here. If we're talking about posterity, I mean, it's not always been an easy road surviving in ISKCON. And the politics have sometimes, many times, been hot and heavy. And I've certainly been in my share of those political battles over the years, especially as a lawyer for ISKCON. a great deal of my time has been spent, I would say, lobbying ISKCON to do in a certain way for legal strategy and so forth. So I'm certainly not a novice at it, but that instruction from Prabhupada that no matter what, you must tolerate the intolerable, has what's gotten me through all these years. Well, I am still somewhat involved. Well, I am pretty involved, but I'm still in the mood. I'm still here is because of remembering Prabhupada's instructions. In that, also in retrospect, reminds me of the story of Bali Maharaj and everything that he had to go through when he had conquered the entire universe and taken over the heavenly planets, and then Lord Vamanadev defeated him, and he was arrested, and Prabhupada says in one of the purports, he said that any other person would have died had they had to go through what Bali Maharaj went through. He called it an examination. These trials and tribulations are an examination. And then Krishna puts us through these trials and tribulations, pushes us to the limit, but simultaneously gives us the strength to survive, to make it through these ordeals. It's kind of like the same principle. So that's always stuck out of my mind quite prominently as a good rule of how to survive when your patience and your tolerance is pushed to the limit. You still have to keep pushing forward.
When I woke up in the morning, I went around Prabhupada's Samadhi, which was only a concrete brick block. That was his Samadhi at the time. And I walked around his Samadhi and I was praying, Prabhupada, what can I do for her? What can I do for her? And I just prayed, take her, because she only wants to be with you, and here she's suffering, and I can't stop her suffering anymore. I can't make her comfortable anymore. I can't even make her laugh anymore. There's nothing more I can do. Please take her, take her. And even if this is offensive, I don't care, I'll take that offense. I just want her relieved from her suffering. So I went to the room and she was unconscious. She was not responding at all. And there were a couple of Bengalis in there testing her heart and seeing, trying to give her some Horlicks and some milk, and she wasn't responding. She was breathing kind of deep. And when I came in, they just all shook their heads and they were crying and they walked out and they left me alone again in the room. And I was sitting there and she was kind of on the edge of the bed, like kind of slumped over, but yet, and I sat next to her and I was kind of like rubbing her back a little bit, and I was chanting japa with the other hand. I'm going Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, and I'm thinking what to do. And I see her fingers move. When I'm chanting japa, her fingers were moving like japa, even though she was very slender, and I thought, she can hear me. So then I asked her, Pishima, in my broken Bengali that she understood, you need to go to the bathroom. Do you need water? Do you need milk? What, can I do anything for you? No answer. Then I said, okay, but she can hear. So I put on Prabhupada's tape of Nitai Pada Kamala, because that was our relationship. I put that tape on. And then I went up to her and I said, Pishima, Prabhupada Shuno? You hear Prabhupada? That's broken Bengali for anyone who wants to know, but it means, do you hear Prabhupada? And Pishima went, huh. And I went, oh my God, that's all she wants. That's all she wants now. So again, every now and then I'd go up to her. I put her in the bed with lots of pillows and tried to make her as comfortable as I could, put the mosquito net around, and I just kept playing Prabhupada's CD. And every once in a while I'd go up to her and hold her and say, Pishima, you need anything, water, bathroom, anything, repeating, and no answer. And then I'd say, Prabhupada Shuno? Huh. Every time. It was like several times through that day. And then in the evening, the devotees, the Bengali devotees they had called her relatives and called because they realized this is going to be the last days or night. And they called them all. So they all came in the room, and someone brought all the little brahmachar, the guru coolies in the room, and they were doing a loud kirtan. They started jumping up and down, and the Bengalis were howling and crying and banging. I mean, it was like this from nothing. of just Prabhupada singing on the CD all day to this raucous, kind of carnival almost, and I thought, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem like what she would want. She needs to be comfortable and peaceful. So I ran outside and I was trying to look for someone, and I just ran into Nitai Chand, who was this big sannyasi who's everyone's afraid of him. And I said to him, no one talks to him like this, but I said, you have to go in Prabhupada's room and you have to tell everyone to sit down and be quiet. I said, the kirtan can go on, but it should be more subdued. In my passion, I just blurred. And he went, okay, and he ran. And I thought, whoa, I didn't expect that. But he did. He went in and he said, Bashun, Bashun, sit down, everyone. Everyone quiet, sat down, and then kirtan went on nicely. The Bengalis quieted down. I was holding her hand on one side. Her son, youngest son, was holding her hand on the other side. And he kind of had his head down and he's sobbing. And some of the other relatives were around. And I called the Bengali lady who was very sweet. Marari Haridasa's wife, Bhakti Ma. I asked her to please come and hold her shoulder, because I said she also wants devotees near her holding her. And so, I held her hand, she held her shoulder, the son was on the other side, people were all around. And we were all chanting nicely. And then her eyes started fluttering, her mouth started moving, and I almost thought that she was going to say something. And I thought, maybe she's going to be all right. I didn't know, and I thought maybe she's going to say something, maybe she needs something. So I went very close in that mood of whatever she needs, I want to give this. And I went very close to her face, and she just went, Hare, 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 Ha. And that was it. And stillness. And I just stood there for a second, and I thought, oh my God, that was her last breath. Was it? And I wasn't sure, and I was like, that was her last breath. And right away I saw this with my mind's eye. I can say with my mind's eye, I saw this vision of her actually starting to move up. But it was like the subtle body moving up. Just like in films, when you see an ethereal see-through body, the physical body is still lying there, but her ethereal body, I actually saw her whole body raising up like this, her eyes starting to open, and she was looking up at the corner of the room, and she started raising her hand, and I actually had to move out of the way. This vision was so profound that I was in her way because I was right in front of her, and she started raising up and her arm, and she's looking up, and I actually moved aside. I was still holding the other hand. I moved aside, and she went like this, and she's looking up at the corner of the room, and Prabhupada is coming down with a big smile on his face, and he has his hand out in the same way. And he came down, and they held hands, and he was also ethereal, like see-through, but it was Prabhupada as we know him. And he came down with a smile on his face, and she looked at him, and they smiled, and they were holding hands, and they started kind of like I could see their backs kind of floating up to the corner of the room. And I'm looking, I remember my eyes were moving. I remember that. Physically, my eyes were actually moving into this vision. And I saw them moving into the corner of the room, and then they both turned around, and they went with a big smile with their eyebrows, both of them. They both turned inwards and went like this, like, everyone's coming. Come on. We're all going to go. And then they disappeared. And the first thing I thought was, they left me here. They left me here. And I was thinking, I wanted to go with them. They left me here. And then I looked down and I realized I'm still holding her hand, but she's not here anymore. And I could feel the difference. I could feel the difference of the energy, because while she was still there in her body, I was praying that I was praying for her that, oh, Prabhupada Krishna, whatever youthful energy I have, whatever strength I have, whatever goodness or piety or anything that I have, let her have it now. Give it to her, because she needs it now. Give her this strength, comfort, whatever. And I was giving her everything I had from inside my heart. And when it stopped, I realized that it had been coming back to me. It's like after the fact, you realize something. And after the fact, after she had left, when I looked down at her, I'm still holding her hand. But now it's not just my energy was going into her, but it had been coming back and forth. She was giving me so much. And I realized that. And I realized that it had stopped now because she was with Prabhupada where she wanted to be, and she was happy. And a little later on, her and my her relatives, the lady relatives, and myself, we had to put fresh sari, fresh tilak, and I helped them. And then everyone came in for another darshan and put flower petals around, and we're offering prayers. And I was standing there looking at her, and I was thinking, now she looks effulgent. Before, earlier in the day, she looked like a dried up prune just withering away, and I was like, how can I help her? But now she was actually, I mean, there was like light coming from her body. It wasn't just like bright-faced, it was effulgence. And I said to myself, I said, she's glowing. And we don't use that word. As devotees, we say she's effulgent or she's bright-faced. I said, she's glowing. And then I went like this to him. I said, no, Ananga, now you're just hallucinating. None of this can be true. Now you're just hallucinating. Something's going wrong here. It's too much emotional things going on. I thought I was hallucinating. As soon as I thought that, it was either Pankajjanari or Jananivas, one of the twins, pujaris, and another pujari had walked in right as soon as I went like this and said, I'm hallucinating. They walked in, and whoever it was, the pujari, said, she's glowing, to the other pujari. And they walked right in front of me and said that, and I thought, Krishna let me hear that for a reason. Because I was just doubting, no, she can't be glowing, this can't be true. Now, none of that could have been true, it's my imagination. And as soon as they walked in, they said, she's glowing. They used the same word, and I said, oh, okay, she is glowing. If that's true, it's all true. Krishna, Prabhupada let me see this. Pishima allowed me to see this. And that has kept me here forever. I know that I have great enthusiasm that at the time of our deaths, for most of us or all of us that even try to do something for Prabhupada, he'll come and take us by the hand. Anyone who's touched by him. And then later on, I've had experience with even my father and my mother who weren't really devotees. My father was in his heart, deep down, he was a devotee. My mother was against the devotees, and at the last moment, she said, is Krishna going to help me? And she said, Krishna's here now, I'm going to have a picnic with him. And she left with the devotees chanting. So this is the amazing mercy, and it's all coming from Srila Prabhupada. We're all taking part in his movement, and these stories that all these devotees have of him, glorifying him, their emotions with him, their instructions from him, are going down in history in these tapes, in these videos, and in these books. And I'm very grateful to you for that. Because this is the Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavatam being expanded. And thank you.
Je anilo premadana koruna prachu